Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Colin Damude. I'm the Director of Product Marketing with MLevel, and I'm excited to host another expert webinar series with Kevin Mulcahy, the co-author of the Future Workplace Experience. We've got a lot of people joining right now, so we're going to start in about 45 seconds. So if you would, just kind of familiarize yourself with some of the options at the top left of the dashboard where it says attendee chat, and I'd love to know where everyone is calling in from. Wow, we got Brazil. So kind of chime in and get used to the feature. That's where you'll ask questions if you have any during the webinar, and we'll be monitoring that to make sure Kevin gets your question. If for some reason he doesn't get it and answer it during the webinar, he'll get it afterwards and make sure he's got your contact information. Maureen just asked, is everyone having issues or just me? I've just heard it's you so far, Maureen. I'm sorry. If you're having trouble with audio, I highly recommend you dial in, but we will be sending the webinar recording out with a PDF of the slides and a special offer from Kevin. So with that being said, I think we've got Chattanooga, Illinois, Seattle. We've got all four corners of the continent covered pretty well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, my name is Colin Damude. I'm the Director of Product Marketing with MLevel. We are the leader in engaging strategies for the new age of learning. We have a templated microlearning and gamification platform, and so would love to walk you through that at some point if you are interested in seeing it. You can just contact us through our demo page on our website at mlevel.com. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kevin Mulcahy, who is the co-author of the Future Workplace Experience. It's an award-winning book that presents actionable framework for meeting today's toughest business disruptions head-on. And I think 2017, the book was named a winner of an Axiom Silver Award for the best business book for HR, which is very cool. Congratulations, Kevin. And the book gives readers clear rules for rethinking, reimagining, and reinventing your organization. Kevin is also the co-host of the Future Workplace Network, which is a U.S.-based membership community for HR executives, where he regularly facilitates corporate workshops to help organizations future-proof their business and HR strategies based on the latest research insights. He lives in Boston, Massachusetts, which you might have seen because he participated in the chat as well. So, Kevin, thank you very much for joining our expert webinar series and being our guest this week on creating a more compelling learning experience.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much, Colin. Thank you. And it's great to be here and back with MLevel. And so the question that we had spoken about, Colin, was just, you had asked me, well, what is new in corporate learning, and what are myself and my co-author, what are we seeing and hearing in corporate learning at the macro picture, right? And I know that certainly at the operational level, the items that you talked about, the micro learning, the leaderboarding, the gamification, these are now going pretty mainstream, but sometimes we need to look at the next trends on what is out there. You use the term future-proofing, and the way we future-proof is we try to anticipate what are the trends that are coming and try to separate which may be trends and which may be fads or fashion, and make sure that our learning strategies do not can accommodate what may be upcoming trends. So I was going to highlight a number of macro trends which I think help inform pretty much everybody's activities in the learning and development community. The first one is this notion of learning as an experience. And what we're seeing and hearing is that corporations are now thinking about the learner experience in the same way that they thought about the customer or consumer experience previously, right? And once people started thinking about the consumer experience, they started re-engineering and redesigning and design thinking their way through reinventing a lot of processes that got at a job that the customer was essentially renting the product or service to do. And so we're seeing some of that thinking now start making its way finally into learning and thinking about what is the learner experience? How do we make that learner experience better? And so here's a guiding principle for this. Many people try to think about benchmarking against, well, who has better learning experiences, and try to think about companies that are within function. And our view is that actually the competition and the benchmark for the learning experience comes down to this. It comes down to the experience economy that we're all living within. And essentially that last best experience that anyone has, that's their minimum expectation for the experiences they want everywhere. So our learners are having experiences with Netflix that allows them to rate content, or on Reddit that allows them to upvote or downvote content, or other ways that they can rate, add, remove, etc., and weigh in on their opinions about the content that they're learning. So if we think about that's the behavior that learners are experiencing outside of the learning environment, it is no surprise, or should be no surprise, when learners start expecting to have those experiences within the learner environment. So that's really the consumer economy. And as in the macro corporate environment, we're seeing a lot of data now that by enhancing the experience of employees, the data now is finally in that, yes, investing in giving employees a better experience. And that's why the title of our book was The Future Workplace Experience. It's essentially focusing on what if we, instead of thinking about our employees as resources and assets, thought about our employees as customers and focused on improving their experience. Would that help in any way with retention and engagement? And what we're seeing here is correlated data from tens of thousands of respondents that basically says by delivering better employee experiences, people are less likely to leave, more likely to go above and beyond, and most importantly, more likely to deliver higher performance. Now, if we just scratch the word employee and we replace it with the word learner, because every employee ought and should be and is a learner, would the logic still apply? If we improved learner experience, would we see that learners are less likely to leave or more likely to go above and beyond, or indeed more likely to achieve higher performance? Would anyone disagree with that logic? The logic seems to float. The case could be made that this is a reasonable next step to go and think about redesigning learner experiences, which is now what many corporations are doing, and reinventing what that learner journey is, all the way from when does the learning journey actually begin and when does it really end, and just rethinking what that macro experience is for learners. And we're seeing some initiatives like shifting from the notion of programs and catalogs of here is what we expect learners to accomplish, to this notion of what are the experiences that we want learners to participate in. So many instructor-led programs, for example, are being twisted around to have less stage on the stage and more guide on the side. And we're seeing those habits also move online, where the early online content was heavy on delivering a lot of lectures and reading, etc. And many of the later courses are now selective videos, selective content, and different ways to interact with the content through games, through more discussion boards, through essentially gamification and other ways to experience the content than just a program, right? The second one is that L&D departments are rethinking their role as content creators and moving over to being learning curators. Again, not all learning has to be built and assembled and use in-house content. And if there are other learning assets that are going viral outside the company, people are a lot more comfortable now bringing not created here assets inside, because the platforms are allowing users to engage with that content in a very different way. And then the third one is a rethinking about consumers of learning. And when we think about consumers of learning, we think a lot about completion. And when we think about the notion of serial learners, the conversation becomes more, how are we enabling people to dip into the sections that they want to dip into, get what they want to get out of it? And if they don't ever fully complete, but they have engaged along the way and we can measure that level of engagement, then aren't they learning? And shouldn't we think about learners as folks? Would I want one person who's all gung-ho at absolutely completing everything in a course, or do I prefer an employee who dabbles across 4 or 5 different courses, gets what they want out of it, but never actually completes anything? And that's a bit of a philosophical debate. Actually, let me just pause there for a moment, just on that question. What would be people's preferences? Well, do you prefer people to be consumers and completers, or do you prefer people to be dabblers and in indulgers? I'm just checking with the attendees if anyone has a view on that they're willing to make a point of view on. Not a quiz, not a survey, just an open question. Yeah, go ahead, Colin. What's your view?
Type your answer in the. Actually, I had while people are thinking about that, go ahead and type your answer if you've got an opinion about that in the attendee chat. But Kevin, I had another question for you.
Sure.
You draw an interesting comparison. With consumers and using the experience of Netflix and Reddit and being able to rate content. And I know that content is entirely entertainment, but do you see any parallels with learners being able to rate courses as they would entertainment content at the corporate level?
I do, and I'm going to link it to, Paul has asked a question about the completion idea, about being measured in some qualitative and quantitative way. So I'll say that the notion of what completion means, completion used to mean completion of the whole course, and now completion is moved to completion of the module, or even completion of the learning asset itself. Did they actually watch the whole 5-minute video? Right, that's the level of attention spans that we're dealing with, and so in that notion of that we can now see quantifiably how much time that people spent on various learning assets, and whether they even opened them or spent. Look, if you're spending 2 minutes on a 5-minute asset, well, that gives some indication there, and which assets people are completing. And then secondly, that's leading to course designers of, if people aren't compelled to either start the asset or complete the learning asset itself, then they're being removed from catalogs. And some platforms allow learners to actually rate the asset on a scale of 1 to 5, as should future learners actually have this asset even exposed to them. Was this useful to you at the learning asset level, not was this course useful to you at the course level? So that's where that convergence is happening. It's a lot more micro, and the notion of what we should be tracking and completion of what has gotten a lot more granular. Let's see if there's any other questions. The idea of assessment, mandatory training, and others. So in the assessment side, the question is, look, if people aren't completing the learning, how are we going to assess? And I think one of the trends that we're seeing here is that a movement towards pre-testing individuals before serving up the learning and letting people opt out of, look, if you already know these pieces, well, can we allow you to opt out of reviewing those pieces and just focusing on the pieces that you clearly had a knowledge gap, and we'll still deem you to have completed the course. So linking the pre-assessment to assets that learner needs to complete, and maybe giving them an opt-out if they've already pre-tested out of those assets. So that's another interesting dynamic that people are experimenting with, because at the end of the day, what we want is to be able to have some degree of comfort that people know the material that we expect them to know to complete the roles that they're in, right? That's the ultimate goal at the end of the day. And that we have to be comfortable that there's an appropriate level of expertise, knowledge, or skills that are there to trust people with those roles. So that's how we're seeing learning being delivered differently. And that will move me to trend number 2 is another form of difference, is this idea of the MOOCs. And previously, these massive open online courses were really institutions offering them and individuals picking them. And those institutions were often, they were mostly third-level institutions, education institutions, or organizations like the World Economic Forum or World Bank or some of that. And what we're seeing now is a lot more corporations are deciding to offer their own MOOCs within to their own employees. But not only to their employees. This is an example here of a MOOC that PwC decided about 18 months ago that they really wanted to encourage all their employees to take. And really it's about making smarter business decisions with data analysis. And the debate was, should it be only offered to employees? And they decided to open it up and offer to anyone who is essentially interested in committing 20 plus hours to taking a course designed by PwC on a skill set that was very specific to what PwC was looking for in its own base. And you'll see there on the right at the time that 14,000 PwC employees took the course, and then they had 71,000 non-PwC learners take the course. And that was a stunning outcome for them. They were expecting perhaps another 5,000 or 6,000 at the time. They, under no circumstances, anticipated that 71,000 people would put in all of the hours to take this PwC course. And then they started seeing that in the applications of candidates who said, I took your course, I have the type of thinking that you expect people to have, interview me, right? And that was the second one of, if you educate beyond your employees, you're almost pre-educating the employees of the future, and you're pre-screening for the types of insights or attitudes or knowledge that you expect to have your future candidates to have. So why begin the training of employees when they join your firm? Why not open up your training and think about pre-training potential future employees, influencers, channel partners, etc.? Why not do that versus why do that is really the question. So that's a big movement that we're now increasingly seeing corporations open their learning to a broader learner community that are not their employees. Some of them are opening it up to customers, up to channel partners, or just to the general public. And it's opening up really new conversations for companies. and helping with employer branding, and helping with the perceptions of employers as a place to go where you may actually be able to learn something if you were to take a job working for this employer. So it's yielding a lot more positive results than negative results. And Colin, I wanted to ask you, what did you think about that? I let you off the hook in getting your own opinion on the previous learner's experience question, but not letting you off the hook on this one. What's your view on this movement of corporations opening up their learning assets to people beyond the corporate domain?
Well, I'm an abundance mentality kind of guy. So I think the more we share, the more interest we garner in sometimes areas that we never anticipated, like happened with PwC. And what an exceptional way to utilize a platform and content to generate interest about your company, either from recruiting or from partnership standpoint or investment standpoint. And so that's 71,000 learners who got exposure to PwC through their content and their training that didn't exist in the past. So I love it. And we've actually, I can't tell you the name of the company, but we've got a very large organization. They're a Fortune 100 company that's utilizing M-Level. It's a first-time use case for recruiting. So they're strictly using a learning platform for that. I love it.
Yeah, and I think that's the angle, or one of the big angles there is teach and see who learns and recruit from those learners. And an example that we did mention in the book was from Tenaris. Tenaris were a $7.5 billion steel company. And when you're in a pretty full employment environment, hands up online, who wants to join a steel company, right, with so many other choices. And they started putting out some online courses. And the first one on the thermodynamics of steelmaking, they had 40 people take it. Now they have 7,000 people who regularly take their online courses on steelmaking and steel forming, and they guarantee a number of those completers job offers, interviews that have led to job offers, and because it became a way of figuring out for individuals to figure out if they were actually interested in the steel business themselves, and for the company to figure out who really was interested. And anyone who spends 60 hours online learning about the subtle nuances of steelmaking, I think, is interested in steel, right? So it became a powerful identifier and screener of future talent as well, that they otherwise could not have done. That was another interesting byproduct there. And so, and I did see about a week ago that famous Internet Trends report, the Mary Meeker Internet Trends report, came out from Kleiner Perkins. And buried in there was some estimations about the number of people taking MOOCs, and the number that they had given was about 33 million people are now taking fairly sophisticated levels of MOOCs. And that's a lot of learners around the world. And the big giant in that pool is edX. And edX, at this point, has 14 million learners taking courses. There's 2,000 different courses available on edX at this point, and they're all free from 130 different global partners, and they have 50 million course enrollments. So the 14 million learners, if you do the math there, learners are enrolling in 3, 4, 5, 6 or more courses for different reasons. And they're not competing. Now, when these MOOCs came out, the press was, whoa, people are not completing MOOCs. And now with some of the insights that organizations are getting on the, let's call it the micro-learning insights, learning how people learn to learn and seeing what they're consuming, now the completion isn't as much the goal as understanding how to deliver learning at scale and at scope, and how do we keep people engaged with learning. And many of the insights that are coming from the studies of MOOCs, etc., are informing some of and revalidating some of the theories that, and I know M-Level is old hat at some of these theories, but old chestnuts like the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve are being revalidated with data from this century, even though that sort of theory is 1,000 years or 100 years old, from the 1880s, etc. So really reinforcing the science and the notions of micro-learning when you can observe 14 million learners. And does the science get validated, or does the science get invalidated? And there's a tremendous validation in the science. In fact, part of the validation is that the videos on edX have even shaved off at least an average of 2 or 3 minutes each over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. So learner attention span is getting shorter. And then what is the other thing that has happened because of the greater levels of data and insight into the study and science of online learning is this notion. It's credit eligible learners. And this is radically new from edX's point of view, is when MIT and Harvard came together and created edX about 5 years ago, there was a line by which they agreed at the time that they would never cross. And that is, yes, we'll educate, but nobody's getting any college credit. Period, full stop. And now, within 18 months ago, edX announced the notion of a MicroMasters program that if you completed these 5 courses online, you would get up to about 25% of a master's degree. And that credit is transferable into the granting college, and you can come to that college and complete the other 75% of the degree at the usual rates there, nonetheless. And so now what we saw is people being able to go online, whether they had an undergraduate degree or not, and get master's level college credit and get the opportunity to apply to these colleges to complete their education in person at these colleges. And just to make a long story short there, one of the very first 4 credit courses was on supply chain management from MIT. And this year, MIT took in 44 people who came in as a result of having completed the online coursework, but would never have entered the radar or the funnel of who would have traditionally been considered an eligible candidate to come on campus for the full-time program. So those 44 people are now registered in the full-time program, and that's another pool of people to actually see if potentially one of the theories they're testing is pre-education online and using online delivery to pre-select stronger candidates. Will that actually lead to better outcomes when you get these people in person on campus? Are they going to fare better or worse? Right. So that's pretty interesting. New statement of confidence in the science of online learning and being able to essentially take a big risk on letting 44 people into MIT who otherwise would not have gotten in there and seen what happens there. Now, maybe the risk is mitigated because they still got the college fees. I don't know, but there's some reputation risk at least, if not financial risk. And so just maybe let's do a poll here. I want to test out the poll features on the platform. So for this poll, for folks present, what is your personal experience with MOOCs, right? And just go through the questions there. Have you enrolled in a MOOC? Have you enrolled but never completed one? You've you've gone all the way and become a verified learner, or you're just a serial mooker. Maybe there needs to be a term for that, but you're just a learning hog, right? And let's give people, Colin, which way? I see it's the results are stacking on the top there.
Yeah, Kev.
Go ahead.
So I personally, I've started MOOCs, but I have not completed one. So I'm a statistic. And
okay.
Let's see, we've got we'll let it go another 10 or 20 seconds here and see. But it seems like most people have not taken one. Hey, a quick question, Kevin, and you may be getting to this later in your content, but do you feel that there's any danger for corporations sponsoring MOOCs and getting employees distracted rather than keeping them focused and on their performance-driven learning that's more relevant to their position?
Well, first of all, employees don't need your permission to register and take online studies outside the company anyways. And at the price points that they're at, which is free or low, they don't need your money, right? So, so the question comes down to a bigger question of learners learn, like writers write, drinkers drink, gamblers gamble, right? So learners learn. And have we really gone so far as to go, whoa, guys, steady on there with all that learning stuff now, and less learning and more working? And the reality is that people are actually, if it's important, people are finding the time to learn, right? It's the same argument for part-time MBAs or part-time undergraduate courses. If people are motivated to learn, they will find the time or create the time to learn. And so getting at your question is, if an employer finds that somebody is a serial and compulsive learner, well, that is the type of person that I want to give them more work and more responsibilities and more opportunities to learn on the job, because they're proving, number one, they're proving they're a learner, but maybe number two, the fact that they feel so compelled to learn so much, spend so much time learning outside the company. The question really is, are we offering enough opportunities for them to learn inside the company? And number three, when we think about what is a culture of learning, do we want to promote or reduce learning or disincent learning? And many corporations are talking about the challenges of promoting a culture of learning and how important it is for employees to always be learning. And so I'd say we should err on knowing what they're learning, recognizing what they're learning, celebrating what they're learning, and think about, it should cause us to go, how can we make sure that there are enough opportunities for them to learn more of what we want them to learn. But given the choice, I'd rather them be a learner than not a learner. And so in the poll, I did jot down the poll stats. Most people had not yet taken a MOOC or had started one but not completed one. I'm on the other side. I've completed more than one. I got into it. I started them. I wanted to evaluate them. I took one of the MicroMasters courses. They're not that hard. It does take the time, but with the science of, I'll just say, micro-learning, with being able to consume in 5-minute videos, with being able to test along the way, with being able to re-watch or re-review before being tested, certainly made me more confident on taking on topics that I would not otherwise have taken on. And then, frankly, my concern was, what sort of an idiot do these people think I am when they see me having watched this big data video for like the 8th time, and it's a 6-minute video, and I still didn't understand it. Am I being, yeah, how are they using the data? Are they thinking that this guy's a class A dunce? Or is this guy a genuine learner struggling? And then I understood it, and then I was able to move through. So I took on a stretch role to learn something that was apparently, would have been out of my grasp were I in a normal learning environment. So there's a question there about the analytics, the data exhaust. all learner activities leaves the data exhaust. I know you know that, Colin. So what are we doing and how are we judging that data exhaust? And are you judging me as slow, or are you judging me as determined and with tenacity? And the assumption you make as a human will affect the types of, as a human decision maker, will affect the types of learning culture that you put in the firm. So I think the data in of itself doesn't do anything other than help us make decisions about people, but let's also be clear on what we want to use that data for, and it shouldn't be to hunt out the weaker learners. Those weaker learners on paper may actually be stretch learners in reality. So that's a big caution there on the data. Let me, how do I go? Yeah, so I don't know, does anybody have a view on that on the sideline there?
Do you want to move forward, or do you want your next poll, Kevin?
Oh, let's see. We can move forward. How do I move this one forward? Let's see. Oh, found it. Okay. So the next one here is this. So that's the expansion of MOOCs, creating tremendous data exhausts, tremendous opportunities and benefits to offering MOOCs, but some cautions of, I'm not paying you in the chair to spend your time coming in, and it's the new watching YouTube at work. I need you to also do the work. So yes, the answer is it's an embarrassment of learning riches, but at the end of the day, learners are better employees and more engaged employees and higher productive employees than non-learners. And the hard part is strategizing on what those learning journeys should be and what those learning opportunities are for them to keep them relevant to the work to be done at hand. And so that's sort of teeing into this third trend, which is this notion of digital badging. And this one is this notion of how do we recognize learning journeys? And I'll use the term, like, what do you call someone who's completed, 2 years of college? A dropout, right? It's the old adage of, if you don't complete, you're a dropout. Or there's certain things that we value for completion and we'll give certificates and accolades for, but other unstructured learning, well done you, but no recognition, no capturing of that. And what's happening now is a recognition that the set of skills that employees, that we want our employees to have is much broader than just the learning content itself. And this is a screenshot from IBM's digital learning platform. They have it on a company called Acclaim. If anyone wants to search for Acclaim and IBM, you'll see the whole story there. IBM has just over 1,500 digital badges available to its employees that employees can attain for completing different skills, whether they're IBM courses, offered courses, or whether they're knowledge courses, skill courses, being a teacher, be it for hard skills, for soft skills, for just showing up at conferences. IBM is trying to reconcile and sort of build a registry of, I knew what you knew when I hired you. You've been here 5, 10, 15 years. I no longer know what you know, and I can't track in one place what you're learning. And so even if we look at some of my favorite badges here from IBM, the IBM Mentor badge in the middle there, IBM said, look, mentoring is a skill that we want our employees to have proficiency with. So they just defined and this goes back to the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, or I guess it's now just called the Scouts of America. It goes back to the notion of, stackable badges, right? The Scouts. It goes back to the stackable credentials, and the ultimate scouting achievement was the Eagle badge. It's one badge. But underneath that was I don't know if anyone on the call is an Eagle Scout, but my impression was like 70, 80 badges and 3 or 4 years of intense obsession around getting these badges, right? And so that's a stackable credential. These badges would stack up, and they meant something. If I said Eagle Scout, let me assure you, I'm not an Eagle Scout, but if I had said I'm an Eagle Scout, you would impute certain characteristics to me, right? If you knew what that was. And so IBM is now realizing, and by the way, over 50% of IBM employees have taken one or more of the digital badges. 67% of the digital badges offered map to the strategic skills that the company is expecting and encouraging its employees to map to. And here was the most surprising one to me, which indicated a little pre-data bias. The age group that were the earliest adopters of the badging movement within IBM were the IBM employees over 50 years old. And that was really interesting because it gave more seasoned employees a way to demonstrate and show that they had the skills that were currently relevant to the company. And just because I was hired 15 years ago does not mean that my skills are dated. Look at what I've done lately and look at how I'm keeping my skills up to date and why, as a seasoned employee over 50, I'm still a very relevant employee, and I can demonstrate that to you because of my my badge collection, right? So that was one of the unintended or surprising outcomes from this movement within IBM. And so we're seeing now Microsoft has moved this way. It's all many of the tech companies, Oracle, EY, many of the tech companies are moving towards this notion of open source digital badging. The industry drivers of this. So anything the point about the badge is if this were a live link and I were to double click on any of these badges, why it's open source is you will be able to tell that it will link to the site and that will tell you what did I have to do to get this badge and what can I now do because I'm the holder of this badge. And nobody can, again, exaggerate that skill or learning on a resume. So let's look at the top one, the IBM Design Thinking Practitioner. There's a big difference between me having gone to a lunch and learn or sat through a design thinking webinar sponsored by M-Level and having gone on a 2-day, 9 to 5 design thinking course. But we could both, like Colin may have done, and we could both claim that we had design thinking expertise, but now you can click on the badge that I got, and you can see Brown Bag, he got a webinar and he got a sandwich, and you can see Colin really put in the effort and what he had to do over those 2 days. And now you can more clearly distinguish which of the pair of us might know more about design thinking. Neither of us can exaggerate. If we got the digital badge, nobody can exaggerate what it was not or misrepresent what it was not. And that's the other stat that's coming out is 30-40% of credentials on resumes are, I'll say, exaggerated, to be kind, but falsified, exaggerated, not accurate, and that's a problem. And so these digital badges are becoming a form of skills registry for corporations. And they're also seeing that people in different parts of the corporations, we can't assume that people over in the, let's say, company part A is not interested in blockchain. They can see who's taking the new exciting courses like blockchain, and often the learners are exposing themselves in parts of the organization where they weren't expected to be. And as companies are looking for talent, for jobs and skills that they don't know, that there aren't enough people yet for, it's really allowing them to check their registry of who's got these skills, and no matter where in the organization the people are with those skills, they can be offered opportunities to come over to this other group or department that needs those skills right now to serve corporate objectives. So it's really tilting this notion of and accelerating the notion of non-traditional certifications and this open source, verifiable, specable digital credentials. And that's just becoming a lot more important as we need people to keep fresh on their skills. So that's a big trend there. And then the last big one is this notion of artificial intelligence and AI. And I think the debate comes down to this. If you call it artificial intelligence, it's threatening because it might be better than you, that it might replace you. If you call it IA, this is intelligence augmentation, which is more accurately what it is, then we get a sense that I'm still in the middle of it and it's not as intimidating and it's something that should work for me. So, what we're seeing here is this, and I'll plug an article that I saw that you had written. Colin had written a blog in April, and it was called Adaptive Learning, Sci-Fi or Reality. And it's really worth folks going and having a look at it. And it seemed inspired by, in the autonomous vehicle arena, there was different levels of autonomy that these vehicles had to determine how much self-control or self-direction they would have. And what Colin did was took those levels and applied them to their equivalency on learners. Is there something you want to add to that, other than please put the link to that article in whatever you're sending out afterwards too, Colin? It was a great article. But give us another piece of color commentary on that one. There was me and there was one other reader. But, I was like, oh, you're Colin's mother. It's great to meet you. I'm Kevin, one of his friends. Yeah. So yourself, it was great to just meet your relatives there online at the article discussion board.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, who pays attention to what content. And, so a lot of people from MIT and other academic institutions and Department of Defense actually visited that blog post. So, because I think everyone is interested in autonomous everything and artificial intelligence, and that's the future. But the article really is to help people understand what they can do now and what's possible and what the future might look like. And for a scale of or levels 0 to 5, we've got 6 different levels of adaptive learning. Most companies are only at a 0 or 1, and some companies start getting into that level 2, where there's some adaptivity, but it's still a manual process, and artificial intelligence hasn't come into the picture enough that true adaptivity with the right kind of a content, enough content can be applied to an individual. And it's interesting that you started off with the MOOCs, because adaptive learning, true adaptive learning, means that you have enough relevant content that can be delivered at the right time for the right person for the right reasons. And few companies have that available to them. Even if they wanted to, even if the technology existed, they wouldn't even have the content available. So it is years away, but there are some things that companies can do now to move towards adaptivity and start thinking that. So more details in the blog, but we'll put that. Kim, can you put that link up in the chat as well? But thank you for mentioning that, Kevin.
Yeah, no, it was really good, and it did a nice job of laying out the difference between, at the low levels, just serving up relevant content, to the very top level, and independently, this was a graphic that I wanted to use to make this point of each learner can have their own completely custom learning path and get to the desired learning outcome. So every one of our learning journeys could be completely customized to help us best get there and machine enhanced. And so and so we're seeing AI come into learning and into the broader HR world. And so just from, and again, I'll just echo off the future proofing that Colin framed at the beginning of this webinar. This is my favorite quote of all time from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest nor the most intelligent that survive. It's the ones that are most responsive to change. And so the point about future proofing is not to make bets, it's to watch what are the changes and to constantly adapt to, experiment with, test and pilot what are those changes to see if they apply to your own L&D environments. And then I will make this assertion of, or this question: will learning leaders who master AI displace those who do not? And I wanted to actually get a poll on that, right, from folks, right? What would be your answer here? Learning leaders who master AI will what? Is it just going to be a few limited specialists, a few geeks? People will gain a few skills, but not really enough to shift their career? Or will they redefine their career? Those that master AI will just completely redefine their career. So what are people thinking? And then affecting those around them as well. So, all right, people are stacking towards either their own career. A few cynics showing up. A few, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. A few extra skills there, but just not enough to make a career worth a career-moving move. So I will just close that one, but I can see it. The weighting is around redefining roles and redefining not just our own roles, but the roles of others. And then this notion, and then we'll take some questions there, that with future workplace, Jean and I said we're not writing another book. Where our future now is that's not how people are learning as much, and it should be through online courses, and the science and any new topic we have to put out should be an online course. So we're going to be launching a course called Using AI for HR. We'll be launching information about that course next week on that site, usingaiforhr.com. And anyone who puts in the code, when we do launch, puts in the code MLevel, will get $100 off of that course. And so that's our response to helping the HR community future-proof. And really what we're doing in that course is essentially looking at all the different ways in which AI is impacting every part of the employee journey, and especially how HR is using AI and could use AI, because those HR people that do adapt and master AI will displace other HR and L&D folks who do not master AI is our view. So I'll turn it back to some questions here. With Jody had a question: what role do you think social communities and social media in the workplace will play in learning? Learning is absolutely social now. It's in many learning experiences, maximum a third of the learning comes from the specialist, the expert at the front of the room or in the front of the cameras, and most of the learning is coming from how it's guiding learners on the side to help learners learn from each other's experiences. And that's part of what the learning experience and the learning journey is how do you help people learn from each other. And a lot more learning is people helping others learn versus showing up to just consume learning from a narrow set. So good question, Jody. Huge fan of social communities. And a big part of it is these MOOCs are being replaced by what I'll call SPOCs, small private online communities where you can, if you assemble a more relevant or a set of learners with more commonality, then you can have more relevant conversations and the learning can accelerate. So people are selecting into smaller and smaller groups, just like Reddit and these other discussion boards online of subsets of learners that really want to explore and learn deeply from each other at specific angles. Any other questions, Colin, that you have or that we see from the board that I haven't addressed?
I don't have any personally. I don't, I think you did a great job of answering everyone's questions already, so they don't have any more. That's how thorough you were. It's been a sincere pleasure having you on as part of our expert webinar series. We will be sending the recording out as well as a PDF of the presentation. And so you can look for that in your email, and we'll have it in our archives on our blog or our webinars page on our website, where we've got past archives. So if you'd like to go back and listen to some of our previous webinars with some notable experts like Carl Kopp and the author of Gamification of Learning and Instruction, and Bob Mosher, then you can get that content on the website. And we've also we've taken a few of the hour-long webinars and kind of chopped them up and created micro-learning webinars. So they're now 4 to 10 minutes long instead of an hour long, with just the relevant information that you need. It's only fitting that M-Level would do that, given that we're a micro-learning and gamification platform. So again, it's been a pleasure, Kevin, and I want to thank everyone for showing up this afternoon and giving us a little bit of your time. I hope it was as valuable for you as it was for me. And please look out for Kevin in our email. We'll send you a little information about the course and being able to take advantage of that. Thank you, Kevin.
Great. Thank you, Colin. And thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.